If you were a kid in the early 2000s and you didn't skate, you sucked. You weren't cool, well, I skated, but I wasn't cool. But that doesn't matter. Look, this was the age of the X Games. Skateboarding, like any fad that came before it, was all the rage. Just a few years prior, nobody knew who Tony Hawk, Andy MacDonald, Bob Burnquist, or Bucky Lasek were. But here in 2000, 2001, 2002, these guys were household names. And the X Games weren't the only catalyst for their newfound fame. In fact, it wasn't even the front runner. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, a video game series released across every major console of the time, catapulted the sport and its top talent into the spotlight. We're talking mainstream popularity, the likes of which is not often achieved by anybody or anything. If you were there at the time, you had a skateboard. If you were there at the time, you had a PlayStation or a Nintendo 64. And if you were there at the time, you wanted to be a pro skater. Today we kick off a brand new retrospective series here on youtube.com/616entertainment, all thanks to my supporters over on Patreon. This entire retrospective was a goal that I set over there, and it's a goal that you guys helped me hit, so for that, I thank you very much. Welcome to the history of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater Part 1, High Risk, High Reward. Every video here on 616 Entertainment is made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you enjoyed the show here today, consider signing up. You'll get early access, exclusive videos and podcasts, and more. Pro Wrestling Tees has the merch. As always, thank you for watching. I'm aware that it's 2024 and that there are over 15 games released under the Tony Hawk banner, but for this retrospective, we'll be focusing specifically on the Pro Skater series. Downhill Jam, Underground, American Wasteland, Project 8, Shred. These are their own things entirely. In order to spend the appropriate amount of time on each title, this is the way to go, I assure you. Sometimes I see videos called, like, the history of video games, and the runtime is 40 minutes. Really? You're gonna cover the entirety of the industry in under an hour? Sorry, that's not my style. We're in this for the long haul. And where's the best place to start? Well, at the beginning, obviously. I don't feel the need to explain the origins of the physical activity of skateboarding in this retrospective. It's a sport. It requires an unbelievable amount of talent and coordination. In some ways, so do video games. Have you ever tried to hand a controller to a middle-aged person who did not grow up playing video games? They have no idea what the hell is going on. So there, we've established a connection between skating and video games in like 10 seconds. Mission accomplished. It all started with 720, a 1986 arcade game from Atari that I've never played. Skate or Die on the NES wasn't the very next offering of its ilk, but it's arguably the one that garnered the most popularity. In the same way that early wrestling games didn't really capture the look or feel of the WWF or WCW, these early skateboarding games left a ton to be desired. Now obviously, much of this can be attributed to the technological limitations of the time. In the late 80s, most video game controllers had one, maybe two buttons on them. For a sport as complicated as skateboarding, you have to look at the tools and go, how is this gonna work? It's like somebody asking you to build them a computer from scratch and all they hand you is a screwdriver. Like, what the hell am I gonna do with this? So we'll fast forward to 1997. Sega's Top Skater hits arcades, and look at this, now we're talking. Top Skater was innovative, it was exciting. The fast-paced, high-octane, unbelievable tricks were far from the realm of realism, and standing on the board yourself offered an experience unlike any other game in the genre. Top Skater would serve as one of the main inspirations for the tag team of publisher Activision and developer Neversoft, who were looking to create a skateboarding video game of their own. Not for arcades, but for home consoles, specifically the Sony PlayStation. Now well into the 90s, the late 90s as a matter of fact, skateboarding itself was gaining more and more traction. The X Games were being aired on television. And while this was indeed mainstream exposure, many of the athletes themselves were left underwhelmed by the competition, even disappointed, feeling as though the clean, sanitized presentation of the broadcast didn't come close to properly representing the skating culture. This was yet another area where Activision and Neversoft were listening closely. The X Games were lame. The newest home console skateboarding game, Street Skater, was also not what many were looking for. Activision and Neversoft's game, then simply titled Pro Skater, needed to be legit. It needed to offer something not only to people who played video games, but people who skated. It needed a face and a name. Insert Tony Hawk. Once again, we don't need to go back to the day Tony Hawk was born or cover his upbringing in San Diego, California. He's the Birdman. He's the first guy to ever hit a 900 in competition. He was the man back then, and he's still the man to this very day. You know Tony Hawk. And Take-Two Interactive knew Tony Hawk. Activision and Neversoft were not the only team out there developing a skateboarding video game in the late 90s. Rockstar Games, the brand we know and love today for Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, were also hard at work on their own skating title. Rockstar actually approached Tony Hawk before Activision. They pitched him on their game, which would go on to become Thrasher's Skate and Destroy. Tony saw it in person. He went hands-on with an early build and turned down their offer. Hawk would state in the fantastic documentary Pretending I'm a Superman that he found Skate and Destroy way too complicated, calling it nearly as hard as actually skating. Tony felt that if you really wanted to translate skateboarding into a video game, and you wanted it to be successful, it had to be easy to pick up and play for literally anybody, not just hardcore gamers. This is where we bring in the aforementioned duo of Activision and Neversoft, who presented an early but playable pro skater build to the Birdman himself, and the rest is history. And with that, I feel it's time to jump into the game itself. Pro Skater had found its frontman, and now Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was on the loose. With fun and simple being the two most important words in the game's DNA, it should come as no shock that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is both addicting and easy to figure out. The X button ollies your skater into the air. From there, matching the D-pad with the square button offers 8 different flip tricks. The D-pad in circle carries the same amount of grab moves, with the D-pad in triangle playing host to a bevy of grinds. Once you're comfortable with the basics, you'll want to branch out. Add some rotation to your tricks. Want to spin left? Hold L1. Want to spin right? Hold R1. Any questions? Each skater has their own set of special moves as well. Tony Hawk will bust out his patented 900 if you build the special meter up and press right down circle in the air. Alyssa Steamer, our lone female skater, will hit a sick backflip. Rune Glifberg's Christ Air is one of the more striking maneuvers in the entire game, and Chad Muska pulling out the boombox for his one-footed 5-0 grind is awesome. Experimenting with everybody and figuring out who has the specials you like the most was one of the best parts. And once you nailed down your favorite, career mode was the next step. I was a Jamie Thomas guy back in the day. Why? Because I thought he looked cool. I thought his long hair was awesome, and it reminded me of some of my favorite wrestlers. It took quite a while for me to figure out that he didn't actually have long hair in the game. He's wearing a hoodie with the hood up, so that was a miss. Career mode is where you go to see it all. Each level comes with a set of tapes to unlock. How do you unlock tapes? Read the screen, idiot! There's a high score, a pro score, challenges like collecting the letters that spell out skate, knocking over boxes or signs, destroying police cars, and more. There's also a hidden tape to find on every level, many of which will have you standing back, looking at it off in the distance and wondering, how the hell am I supposed to get over there? Each run lasts 2 minutes, meaning that the score challenges must be completed within that time frame. If you've been playing this game as long as I have, these challenges aren't much of a chore. But in the early days, this was the real deal. Career mode was basically forced practice. You have to get pretty good to nail these pro scores. And with every tape you unlock coming careening toward the screen after your run is finished, you want it to be good. Those tapes floating and rotating the way they do. This was a dopamine hit unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And I mean, I didn't have an N64. I had never gotten a star in Super Mario 64. If you feel like these two things look somewhat similar, it's because this is exactly where Neversoft got the idea. Earning tapes not only unlocks the next level, but new gear as well. Each skater has their own exclusive set of decks to choose from. Tightening your trucks to adjust your turning sensitivity is key depending on which stage you're playing. And come on, if you're not matching your wheels to your deck, you're a heathen. A lawless heathen, undeserving of the option in the first place. The tape challenges aren't the only area where variety is the operative word, luckily. Now let's take a look at the different types of stages. We kick things off in the warehouse. A half pipe, myriad rails to grind, simple but inviting gaps out in the open, begging to be tricked. It's the perfect opener. The very next stage unlocked is the school, and now the warehouse seems quaint. This area is massive in comparison, now loaded with stairs and winding coils, rooftops, doors that open to reveal secret sections, bridge-like walkways over dugout pits. Neversoft were telling us that anything goes with this level, and that we better stay on our toes. I love the screen by the pools with the music videos playing. Now, where do you go after school? To the mall. Not to hang out, but to skate, goddammit. This is the first of the linear stages, meaning that once you get to the end, that's it. So the score challenges, this time, are even harder to pull off. Mastering your combos across those tricky, precarious poles and ledges is becoming more and more important, and that's another brilliant piece of the design puzzle. There are 0 difficulty spikes in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. There are 3 competition stages sprinkled throughout career mode to mix it up even further, each competition consisting of 3 separate runs, or heats. Tapes are thrown out the window here. Don't be looking for a hidden VHS. Don't worry about collecting skate. Your performance is judged on variety of tricks, points, and accuracy. So landing each move is now more important than ever. Downtown Minneapolis is another street-based level, this time with cars that will run you over if you're not quick enough to get out of the way. Idiot! Downhill Jam is another linear course, this time with even more treacherous and mind-boggling placement of letters and targets. Burnside Portland is competition number 2. San Francisco is wide open with the most ridiculously placed hidden tape yet. And once you've reached this point and you're scratching off the final set of tapes, the game starts hinting at what comes next. A top secret competition? What? The law is on my tail? After achieving the final tape, the secret is revealed. One final competition in Roswell, New Mexico. The ramps are made of some sort of strange, sleek steel. This sound isn't found anywhere else in the game. Despite being outdoors, this stage feels claustrophobic, like we're being watched. Tall, barbed wire fences surround the entire park. And then we stumble on the strangest, most ridiculous thing we've seen yet. An alien. There's a goddamn live alien behind this wall, begging us for help.
Oh no! Help me!
We've got a UFO, a dig site with extraterrestrial skeletons. This whole place is cursed. If it wasn't already abundantly clear that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater does not take itself overly seriously, the alien had to be the final confirmation, right? Neversoft knew from the beginning that they wanted to aim for fun over realism, and in simply walking around and looking at the stages, I think it's pretty clear that they nailed it. How often when walking around your hometown in real life do you notice a perfectly shaped quarter pipe? You have to take artistic liberties when it comes to a project like this. But believe it or not, the alien that we can find hidden on the Roswell stage is not the only goofy addition to this game's roster. Being told that the law is on your tail is a little ominous, especially after ruining 5 of their cars in the San Francisco stage. But after unlocking every tape, we come to find that the law is Officer Dick, a fictional cop who is a playable character. His special moves are completely ridiculous, but he's not the only hidden character. Private Carrera can be unlocked via cheat code. Who is Private Carrera? She's apparently a porn star, with her age being listed as barely legal. Sign of the times, right? The Nintendo 64 port of the game would change the names of Private Carrera's moves as well as her age, now listing her at 41 years old, making her one of the oldest characters on the roster. Quite a leap from barely legal, wouldn't you say? And that's a great springboard. After launching exclusively on the PlayStation, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater would soon make its way to other platforms. The Nintendo 64 cartridge of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was blue, which is awesome. Only 42 games in the console's entire library had colorful cards, with blue encasing only 6 of those 42. Tony Hawk shares this color with Hydro Thunder, The World Is Not Enough, WCW Backstage, never mind, forget that last one. The N64 port also removed the blood splatter that squirts from your head after a gnarly bail, which sucks. Without a doubt though, the most egregious of all Nintendo adjustments comes to the soundtrack. Now, this is YouTube, and you guys know the drill. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater features an iconic soundtrack, arguably one of the more memorable soundtracks ever put together for a video game. I can't really play it for you here today, but you know what we'll do? I'll risk it a little bit. I'll play just a little bit. That's about all I can get away with, and who even knows if that got by? Maybe you'll never see this footage because I had to cut this part entirely. The music of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, from Goldfinger to Primus, from the Dead Kennedys to Suicidal Tendencies, we're talking about an unforgettable playlist. Unfortunately, the Nintendo 64 version of the game, seeing as though it was printed on a cartridge and not on a CD, completely neuters the soundtrack. Nearly all of the vocals are removed. Most songs are pared down into a tiny instrumental loop. It sucks. The Dreamcast port was even worse I'm just kidding. The Dreamcast port is fine. It obviously looks better and runs smoother than the PlayStation due to the more powerful hardware, but I've never owned a Dreamcast, so I've never experienced this version. What I did experience almost every time I turned this game on was the intro cinematic. I swear, man, this was practically a never skip. Back then, in 1999, we didn't have the internet in my house. We didn't even have a computer. I couldn't just look up skate videos online. It either had to be X Games season or maybe I could catch a few violent bales on a TV show like Maximum Exposure or something. So to have these cinematics right here on my PlayStation, this was awesome. Multiplayer meant that you and your friends could compete head-to-head at sleepovers, and if you don't have memories of going to war with your friends in Tony Hawk, I'm sorry. The evolution of your own gameplay is something that I've always laughed at when it comes to Tony Hawk games. When you first start playing and you're finding your feet, you'll crash and burn. It's okay. You have to figure out what does and doesn't work, right? Bail, dust yourself off, get back up, and get to work. But once you're good, once you can really cook, that's out the window. One lone botch in the opening seconds is enough to ruin an entire run, and you'll get so fast at restarting, the menu won't even show you doing it. One of my favorite memories of this game is tied to my ex-girlfriend. We had an ongoing joke that someday we would meet up in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, with both of us saying we would demolish the other. Long story short, eventually, it happened. And I absolutely decimated her. I wasn't playing about my Tony Hawk, Dan-Dans. And it went both ways, don't worry. We used to go bowling all the time. I never beat her once. I never even came close. Holy shit, was she an amazing bowler. I haven't spoken to her in 10 years. I don't know where she is, but I hope she's well. And I hope every time she sees Tony Hawk on television, she remembers the day that I went to work. The game's namesake, the Birdman himself, didn't only serve as a marketing device. Tony Hawk spent countless hours in motion capture. He play tested the game himself with a debugged PlayStation console at home. He would invite other pro skaters over to see the game before they were supposed to, in order to get outside opinions. And in some ways, I feel like he deserves some design credit. Hawk himself stated that, on many occasions, he'd go directly to Neversoft to tell them, hey, this isn't a thing in skateboarding, or hey, this isn't accurate. Real skateboarders will laugh at this if you don't change it. Jamie Thomas, my skater of choice, said in the Pretending I'm a Superman documentary that he was on the fence about being a part of the game at first. He talked about how many skaters scoffed at the X Games. It wasn't really what skating was about. And he worried that being involved with a video game carrying that same theme might make him look bad. Then he saw the game. He saw who else was involved with the game, and he changed his tune. This video game was legit. The music was right. Finally, this was something to properly represent skating to the masses. At the 1999 Summer X Games, Tony Hawk won the gold medal for his doubles performance with Andy MacDonald and landed the first ever 900 in professional competition. It was a massive moment, picked up everywhere, and the timing was perfect. This was 3 months before the launch of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Just a couple days later, I emailed Neversoft because we were in the final beta version of the game. Like it was being submitted to Sony. Mm-hmm. You know, you cannot change it once that happens. Like you send it to the console people. That's it. You're locked into that version. And they were about to send it, and I was like, hey, do you think you could put 900 as a trick in there? And I'll never forget. Joel, who was the head of Neversoft, sent me a reply just like, already on it. You fucking rule.
Sick. On September 29th, 1999, the game hit store shelves. The reviews were out of control. Game of the Year awards piled up. And all in all, over 3.5 million copies of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater were sold. And, well, that includes the copies of Tony Hawk's Skateboarding, which the game was retitled to in Europe to avoid any confusion over whether or not this was skateboarding or ice skating. Yes, I'm serious. What began as a modified version of Neversoft's Apocalypse video game, still with Bruce Willis in the starring role, would transform into Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, kickstarting one of the most well-known, tried-and-true franchises in video game history. Tony Hawk himself has credited the game not only as one of the main reasons skateboarding is still so popular, but one of the main reasons that he himself is still relevant. This is a guy who has won gold medals. He has been the face of his sport. He's been on television. He has been in movies. To put that out there, that's really saying something. It was a major risk to become the frontman of what was largely an unproven video game developer's new project. There were no guarantees that this game would be a hit, you know? And if Tony Hawk's Pro Skater fizzled out quickly or bailed on its first trick attempt, that could be the end of Tony's career. But you know what they say, with high risk comes high reward. Before we get out of here, I feel it's worth noting that Activision, prior to the launch of the first game, offered Tony a total buyout. $500,000, a one-time lump sum payment for the continued use of his image and likeness. Tony turned the deal down, opting instead for a much smaller payment with royalties and residuals to be connected to every project that he and Activision would possibly collaborate on going forward. It was a high risk, and I'd call it a high reward, too. What did I say at the top of this video? Activision and Tony Hawk have partnered on more than 15 games together? Goodness gracious.
When the fourth game was released, my main contact at Activision asked to have lunch with me in LA when I was there one day. He's like, here's what's happening. We're releasing the fourth game. The last three are still in the top 10 of sales. Things are way bigger than you ever thought. And he handed me a check for $4 million.
Oh,
that happened.
wow.
And he just slides his check over, and I was like, I got lunch.
Yeah.
There it is. Thank you for joining me for this, the history of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater Part 1, High Risk, High Reward. Now, Dan Dance, we are just getting started here. As you may have guessed, next time it's going to be Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. I'm a one-man crew. I write these videos, I shoot these videos, I edit these videos, I upload these videos. I do it all myself. If you'd like to support me over on Patreon, that would be awesome for me. And you'd be unlocking hundreds of hours of exclusive videos and podcasts and more, which is pretty awesome for you. I think that's a pretty cool trade-off, right? Plus, every new sign-up brings us closer to unlocking a new video. This, what you're watching right now, the history of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, this was a Patreon goal. So everybody who signed up before you that unlocked this for you, give them a round of applause. I know I am. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I love ya, and I'll see you later.